Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of the Bridging the Gap Between Theory and Practice webinar series, proudly presented by World Heritage USA with the support of the Historic Preservation Education Foundation. My name is Janice Harrington, and I am Programs Coordinator for World Heritage USA. Thank you for joining us here today. This series is designed to support emerging professionals in the field of heritage preservation by providing specialized training that helps bridge the disconnect between academic study and real-world application. Whether you're just beginning your career or are an established professional looking to revisit foundational concepts in a new way, this series offers insights and resources to deepen your knowledge and practice. In this episode, we'll explore a cornerstone of preservation practice, historic site management. From treatment plans to community engagement to security issues, we'll provide an overview of the keys to successful management of historic sites. Whether you're new to this type of work or looking to expand your knowledge, this conversation will offer insights and resources you can apply in your own work. We encourage you to engage with today's discussion by using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Please be sure to post your questions in the Q&A section rather than the live chat. Be sure to visit the Bridging the Gap webpage after the webinar for additional resources suggested by today's speakers to support your further learning. To guide us through today's topic, we are joined by two experts working in site management, Mitch Maniccia and Matt Webster. They will draw from their vast experience to share tips, examples, and best practices for managing historic sites. Let's get started with our first speaker, Mitch Maniccia. Mitch is the Director of Operations at the Seward House Museum in Auburn, New York, with more than a decade of multifaceted museum service. Listed on the National Register of Historic Places and designated as a National Historic Landmark, the Seward House Museum contains an entirely original collection, making it a rarity in the historic house museum sector. Today, the museum connects people to the legacy of the Seward family and interprets their vision for equality, service, democracy, and progress. Maniccia possesses a strong working knowledge of historic preservation, historic site management, grant writing, and project management. He has helped administer nearly $4 million of stewardship initiatives and facilitated successful fundraising efforts to supplement these costs. He primarily directs the maintenance and operation of the Seward House Museum's buildings, grounds, and utilities. I am very pleased to now hand the floor over to Mitch.
Thanks, Janice. So again, my name is Mitch Maniccia. I'm the Director of Operations at the Seward House Museum, and today I'll be discussing preservation, interpretation, and organizational stewardship at the Seward House Museum and how my position interacts with each of those topics. And so here's an overview of what I'll be discussing in the next several minutes. I'll give everyone a brief introduction to the Seward House Museum and where it originated and how it became a museum today. It's very important context to talk about, given the historical significance of the site, both the building, the grounds, and the collection that we exhibit to the public, and how we interpret the Seward family through engaging programming. And then lastly, how historic preservation is accounted for in organizational stewardship. And since I work at a historic house museum and I'm a historian in practice, I'll start the story of the Seward House at the beginning, which is 1816 in Auburn, New York. And for those familiar with the geography of New York State, Auburn is a little bit to the left of dead center of New York State. So Syracuse is pretty close to the middle, and Auburn is about 30 miles west of Syracuse, New York. In the early 1800s, Auburn was an up-and-coming town. Central New York has a lot of waterways. Auburn has a river that flows directly through its now downtown, and mills were constructed in the early 1800s to take advantage of that water power. An early stakeholder in early Auburn society, Judge Elijah Miller, constructs what is now the Seward House Museum in 1816 as a federal-style brick townhouse. Once William Seward moves into the home, he renovates it several times over the course of the 1800s. And the picture that you can see in the bottom middle is the Seward House Museum today. So it's a main building there, the yellow brick building with the red roof. We have a historic barn and carriage house built in 1860 directly behind it. And to the south of the main building, which is to the left of that picture there, are about 2 acres of gardens. And the site is located directly in the middle of downtown Auburn. So we are an urban historic site. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means for our operations later in the presentation. But in any case, the original house was built in 1816. William Seward, who is in the upper left of the slide here, first travels to Auburn in the early 1820s. He was a recent college graduate from Union College in Schenectady, New York. He had taken the bar exam. He was a very intellectually gifted young man, very industrious. He travels to Auburn on the newly constructed Erie Canal in the early 1820s and forms a junior partnership with Judge Elijah Miller. And the same time that he starts working for Judge Miller, he begins courting his new boss's daughter, Frances. Less than a year after that, he asks for Frances's hand in marriage, and William and Frances would move into this residence to start their family. And they're married in 1824. So from 1824 continuously until the 1950s, this would be the residence of the Seward family. Once William Seward and his wife have passed away by 1872, the home is handed down to Seward's youngest son and namesake, William Seward Jr., who would live in the home with his family, and his middle child, William Seward III, William Seward's grandson, would pass away in 1951. And it's at that point that William Seward III would bequest the entire estate, all the buildings and all the stuff inside all of the buildings to a local foundation that operate the house as a museum for about 50 years. And then in 2008, the Seward House Museum is incorporated within the state of New York as a nonprofit, and the Seward House Museum has existed as such since 2008. And the stories that we tell here at the Seward House Museum are multifaceted. So we, of course, talk about William Seward, the main guy. He is Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of State before purchasing Alaska in 1867, which is one of the images at the top of the slide there. That's William Seward's big claim to fame, Seward's Folly. Seward's Icebox, or if you didn't like President Andrew Johnson, perhaps you'd called it Johnson's Polar Bear Garden instead. And a lot of people who visit the Seward House Museum today are familiar with just that one component of William Seward's legacy, the purchase of Alaska. But he accomplishes a lot more over the course of his political career, even outside the office of Secretary of State. Seward is a New York State Senator. He's governor of New York. He's a United States Senator for about 11 years in the 1850s, leading up to the American Civil War. He runs unsuccessfully for president in 1860. We all should know that Abraham Lincoln becomes president in 1860 rather than William Seward, and Lincoln invites Seward to serve as his Secretary of State. Seward advises Lincoln on a number of matters during the American Civil War. The image in the top left is a depiction of the first reading of the Emancipation Proclamation to Lincoln and his cabinet. Seward is featured prominently in the foreground since he was the author of the Emancipation Proclamation. He also helped Lincoln write his first and second inaugural address. And the night before Lincoln gives his Gettysburg Address, he meets with his Secretary of State, William Seward, for about an hour with a copy of the speech, going over it one more time before presenting it to the public on November 19th, 1863. So while we can talk about Seward as the almost president and a very influential Secretary of State, we also focus on other aspects of his years as Secretary of State, but also other members of the Seward family. Seward's wife, Frances, was a conductor on the Underground Railroad. She elects to open up this house as a checkpoint on the Underground Railroad in the 1850s. She befriends Harriet Tubman. She sells land that she owned to Tubman, that Tubman would then build her home on further down the street from what is now the Seward House Museum. We work in close partnership with the Tubman sites here in Auburn, since there is some narrative overlap between the Seward and Tubman families. And because the house was lived in for so long by the Seward family, we have an entirely original and intact collection. So every single thing that we have inside the house, and you can see a couple of rooms depicted here, a drawing room on the lower left and the family library on the lower right, all of those objects you see aren't just original to the era, they're original to the family. It is an entirely original and intact collection, which is a rarity among historic house museums. So visitors feel fully immersed in the Seward family history when they come and visit the Seward House Museum. because of our original and intact collection, but also because the building is historically significant as well. The Seward House Museum is dual listed as a National Historic Landmark and is on the National Register of Historic Places. And people who are interested in old architecture, but also a comprehensive collection like this, visit the Seward House Museum from year to year. We get about 13,000 visitors annually. And since we are located in the middle of downtown Auburn, we are very visible to people who visit downtown Auburn as well. So we get a lot of people who walk onto our site and make their experience to downtown Auburn a little bit more robust with a visit to the Seward House Museum. So, how does the Seward House Museum interpret this very robust family through engaging programming? I've been here at the Seward House Museum for 12 years. I started in 2014, and I've been in my current role for a little over a decade. And one of the most declarative statements that best reflects the museum is the tagline you see towards the right of this slide, "One house, many stories." We can talk about any number of different movements in the 19th century through the lens of the Seward family. They were engaged in all sorts of different initiatives at the local, state, federal, and because Seward was Secretary of State, even at the international level. So there's all sorts of different stories and narratives that we can share with visitors, and we never run out of stories to tell. But we're a very robust staff. We only have 8 full-time staff members. We rely heavily on volunteers and interns, but we also rely on partners. And the meat of my presentation here is talking about one program that we're able to accomplish through our partnerships with other organizations in Auburn, New York. So we do offer guided tours at the top of every hour to the general public, but for the majority of our programming, we have to partner with other sites so that we have the organizational capacity to lift up these stories effectively. And our strongest partners are the City of Auburn and the New York State Equal Rights Heritage Center. Now, the New York State Equal Rights Heritage Center is a recently constructed museum directly next door to the Seward House Museum. They have ample parking. They have room for bus drop-offs and group tour orientations. So any large group tours or school groups that visit the Seward House Museum are able to stop at the Equal Rights Heritage Center first, get oriented effectively, and then they're brought onto our site. So it makes sense physically, but also logistically, these partnerships. And because we're able to tell all sorts of different stories here at the Seward House, we're able to align these stories with different curriculums. And today, Tuesday, this time of year, we have what are called Passport to History tours. And you can see a flyer for Passport to History on the left of the slide here. So every fourth grader in the county of Cayuga, which is the county that the Seward House Museum is in, visits the Seward House Museum as part of the Passport to History program. And the program is only made possible through partnerships. And you can see all of the different partners that Seward House Museum collaborates with on this flyer for Passport to History. I've mentioned the City of Auburn. I've mentioned the Equal Rights Heritage Center, which you see listed on the flyer there. Auburn is blessed with a number of cultural and historic sites, and all of them work in tandem for this program. These fourth graders in Cayuga County are given a booklet, an actual passport booklet right here, and it gets stamped every time they visit one of the sites in Auburn. And it gives these students an opportunity to have direct ownership over all of these cultural sites in their hometown. It helps build pride of place. And the longevity of Seward House's operations is both a blessing and a curse, I like to say. It's a blessing because it's structured. It's been around for a while. We know how the museum operates best. But it's also still a historic house museum. And sometimes we have to fight the stigma of being an old historic house museum. People might not feel like they have access to us because we're a historic house museum, but Passport to History negates that. These kids who come in fourth grade who take a tour of the Seward House Museum feel a sense of ownership. They become the museum becomes more accessible to them, and they remember their visit. I've been here long enough where when I first started, we would get fourth graders on a Passport to History tour, and now some of those students are finishing their high school career or are already in college and are starting internships, not just at the Seward House Museum, but in the field because they had that experience with the Seward House Museum at a young age. And so it's a fabulous program that gives these fourth graders a chance to come in to learn about their local history, build that pride of place. And this program wouldn't be possible without all these other partner sites and the collaboration between the City of Auburn and the Equal Rights Heritage Center. It's these partnerships that make impactful programming like this possible. But there is a longer return on investment for some of this programming. And it's a lot to manage logistically. And even though we have three people on our education department, the Passport to History program has been a bit of a hot potato at times, and sites find it challenging to manage all the logistics of getting every fourth grader in the county to visit their site. And it's something that, while has a very recognizable impact when you bring people through the house, it does create a challenge for the Seward House Museum and other organizations. Today, for example, we don't have a public tour until the afternoon because we have so many fourth graders going through the house on the Passport to History program. So people arrive thinking they could take a tour and find out that there are 100 fourth graders in the house and they have to wait until the afternoon. So there's a bit of pros and cons to programs like this. But because we have robust partnerships and because we rely so heavily on volunteers and interns to help us carry this weight, we can keep these partners close if we have other programs we want to implement. And another program that we've uh, been successfully implementing for many years now is our Hands-on History Camp, which is a week-long summer camp, a picture of which you can see in the lower middle here, where we bring youth onto the site and we have different programs for them to do, mostly outside. 19th century games and tea parties is a popular one that we offer. So it's more ways that we can tell all the different stories that Seward House Museum has to offer through these different programmings. And I cannot stress the importance of partnerships enough. They make programs like this possible. So Seward House Museum stays relevant, stays interesting because of our engaging programming, but that engaging programming is only possible through these partnerships and a lot of behind the scenes work to make these things happen. And so, while these engaging programs are great for people to take advantage of from year to year, we want to make sure that the Seward House Museum stays around from year to year so that we can continue to offer these programs, so that we can continue to serve our mission and serve the public well. And historic preservation, at least from my point of view as Director of Operations at the Seward House Museum, is front and center always. Preserving the historic landscape is always top of mind for me. And Seward House Museum has come a long way in the time that I've been here, not just from initiatives from my department, but collectively, what we've been able to accomplish as a staff. And one of the most compelling things I think we've done is try and make conscious efforts to move away from that old historic house museum stigma, where we want to be as accessible as possible for as many different visitors as possible. And so at the top of the slide here are before and after shots of the parlor, which is the first room that visitors see on a guided tour of the Seward House Museum. And when I first started, there were ropes up with stanchions that prevented people from going more than a foot into this room. And that picture on the left is the experience that people had when they visited us previously, where it doesn't look very welcoming. You're standing at a distance from things. But now, since then, we've taken the ropes down and we bring people into the parlor and they're able to walk around the furniture and they feel like they're actually visiting someone's home. And it unlocks a different experience for people. But at the same time, we have to be very observant of our guests. All tour guides, whether they are interns like this picture here, volunteer or staff, have to be very upfront with visitors that everything in the house is original and task the visitor with becoming stewards themselves. And it's as simple as saying, please don't use any of the historic furniture, or please don't chew gum or bring soda into the house. Please stay with me as we go from room to room. But it lets visitors know that the home that they're being sequenced through is very historically significant, and it gives them a job when they come through the house. And we do the same thing with our Passport to History tours, telling these fourth graders that they need to be careful when they move through the house, that we preserve it for the next Passport to History group that's coming up behind them, both the following week or the following year or even the following decade. And so on the right is a list of all the different topics that we talk about at volunteer training every year. And these volunteers that we have are treated like staff members, really. They have a lot of responsibility because we take preserving and stewarding the site very seriously. And we go over safety with them, security priorities, that we are telling them that they are on the front lines, and it falls on them as much as it does staff members to make sure that the Seward House Museum is perpetuated and that we do a good job preserving the site. And akin to having good partnerships with uh, keeping sure that we have engaging programming, stewarding and preserving the site is a team effort. So it's not all on one person. It's going to take all of us to make sure that the Seward House Museum is around for a while. But we also operate within an old house. Seward House was built in 1816, and the utility upgrades made to the home in the 19th century are not what some people might expect in today's creature comforts of the 21st century. So, for example, we do not have air conditioning at the Seward House Museum. And the graph here in the middle bottom, you can see that it gets quite warm in the upper hall. The temperatures climb towards 90 at some time during the summer, with relative humidity upwards of 75 or 80%. So we have to close the second floor at times, and we have to set out a lot of folding chairs and have people sit, bring people bottles of water because frankly it's just too hot to bring people through the house some days during the summer. And sometimes tours are too big to bring through the house. We only allow 20 people on a tour, and any more than that have to get forwarded on to the next tour because the spaces are small. We have to keep in mind that people are going right up to items of the collection. And so capping tour capacity is important to not only keep the feeling of an intimate visit with the Seward family intact, but also make sure that their items remain intact. And we're doing a good job making sure that we're not overcrowding the house, both when it's too warm, but also when we have a lot of people who are signed up for tours. Um, we spread it out over the course of a day if we have to. And these are all things that we all have to keep in mind. Every staff member, every volunteer, as I mentioned just a couple of moments ago, it's a team effort to make sure the Seward House Museum stays preserved for the next tour coming in, both that same day, the following week, the following month, the following year, or even the following decade. So if I could condense my message for you today, it would be that partnerships make engaging programming possible, and stewardship is made easier and more efficient if you have a good team working collaboratively on it. So partnerships and teamwork makes the dream and historic preservation work. And so with that, I will go ahead and stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Mitch. I'm looking forward to hearing some of the questions during our Q&A session in regards to your presentation. Next, I'd like to introduce our second speaker, Matthew Webster. Matt is the Vice President of Operations for the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. In this role, he oversees the foundation's building and landscape resources. During his 18 years with the foundation, he has also served as Executive Director of the Granger Department of Architectural Preservation and Research and Conservator of Architecture. Prior to Williamsburg, he served as Director of Preservation at Drayton Hall in Charleston, South Carolina. He has also served as Director of Restoration for George Washington's Fredericksburg Foundation in Fredericksburg, Virginia, where he oversaw the restoration of Kenmore. Matt sits on the board of Falmouth Heritage Renewal in Falmouth, Jamaica, and on the advisory boards of Preservation Virginia, Stratford Hall and Menoken in Virginia, and Drayton Hall in South Carolina. He has consulted on projects throughout the eastern United States as well as internationally. He has taught at the University of Virginia and University of Mary Washington and lectures frequently on preservation, architecture, and history topics. I'm very pleased to now hand the floor over to Matt.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So like Mitch, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about operations here at Colonial Williamsburg. I thought I'd start off by just talking a little bit about the location of Williamsburg, Colonial Williamsburg, which is located in Williamsburg, Virginia. It's between Richmond and Virginia Beach, about 2.5 hours south of Washington, D.C., which impacts our visitation as well as the climate that we have to deal with in protecting the resources here at Colonial Williamsburg. We're located in an area that's called the Historic Triangle. You can see here a zoom in of the map. So we're on the peninsula down here. There's Williamsburg that just got underlined, but we also have in close proximity Jamestown and Yorktown, which is obviously the Battle of Yorktown. The town of Williamsburg served as the capital of colonial Virginia in the 18th century. Here you see a 1780s map that's done by a French engineer during the Battle of Yorktown, showing the layout of the town in the 18th century. All the little red dots that you're seeing are actually buildings. And this is largely what the plan for Colonial Williamsburg was based on. We have quite a few original structures. Obviously, the town changes over time. So a lot of those buildings were reconstructed and put back into play, largely based on this map, but also archaeology and documentary research as well. So the idea behind Colonial Williamsburg is that we don't have anything that wouldn't have been here in the 18th century. Like I said, town changes over time. This is a 19th century photograph of the town. Buildings change over time. The plan of the town changed. Streets are added, streets disappear. So a lot of that impacted the town of Williamsburg. And what really happened during the restoration, here you can see a picture on the right is the 18th century courthouse, which was still standing in the image. But on the left is that big Greek revival church. That church actually was torn down in the early 19th century, but that church sat on the site of both the magazine grounds for the 18th century town, but also right on top of what was the market house for the town in the 18th century as well. So the dramatic changes that happened to the town over time. In the early 1900s, in the 1920s, Rockefeller is engaged, who's on the right holding the brick, and then by W.A.R. Goodwin, who is pastor at Bruton Parish Church. And Goodwin talks Rockefeller into visiting, engages him with the idea of restoring certain buildings in the town and starting to interpret the history. And this is really kind of at the beginning of the colonial revival period that was occurring in the early 20th century. So there's this great interest in early American history. Goodwin's successful in engaging Rockefeller, and in 1926, Rockefeller actually purchases the first antique that would be kind of at the core of what would become Colonial Williamsburg, and that antique was an 18th century structure, the Ludwell Paradise House. Rockefeller continues to be engaged in the process, and the early restoration starts. And we all have to remember that in the early 1920s, no one was really trying to do anything like this, and especially on the scale that they were at Williamsburg. So the idea that Goodwin and Rockefeller came up with was to actually restore the town, the 18th century town of Williamsburg. And you can see one of the early architects on the left and one of the craftsmen on the right working on a house. And, obviously going through here, uncovering evidence. If you look at the hand that the worker doesn't have a hammer in, you can see an 18th century fence picket that was used to restore the dormer in the house. So some really great details, and that's kind of the evolution of architectural preservation and conservation, as well as the museum studies here at Williamsburg. Now, it's not to say that it didn't evolve over time, because the restoration could be a little aggressive. This is the 1750s Getty House being restored in the 1930s. And so you can see that, they really dug into that. And over time, that started to change. They started to understand a lot of the evidence that was there, the processes, the importance of keeping original materials and looking for the evidence of what the building looked like. So this slowly kind of evolved into the procedures that we have today, and the preservation ethic that we have today really evolved out of this process. We also had the archaeological sites. So this is the site of the Governor's Palace. The Governor's Palace burns in 1780. This became the school for Williamsburg. I believe it was the high school went over top of this site. So Rockefeller paid to build a new high school, but then also paid to demolish the school that sat on this site, excavate the palace in preparation for reconstructing the building. And so that's the real quick story of kind of the evolution of Williamsburg over time. But I wanted to talk about the division that kind of oversees a lot of these resources. We're a fairly big organization. We have approximately 2,000 employees total. I oversee the Preservation and Operations Division, which has about 170 employees in it. And so in this division, we have work control. This is a group that actually all calls go into. So if there's anything from an air conditioning issue, if you have the doors not working, or building needs work in general, all your calls go into work control, and then work control distributes that work to the appropriate departments. And so this is a 24/7 group. They also watch all of our environmental control systems throughout the foundation. So all the different buildings and what those systems are doing, if there's any alarms, if the proper environment's being maintained to protect the resources. And then we have architecture, engineering, and construction. These are our architects and engineers, and our construction managers. We have a lot of projects that go on. Like I said, is that we're preserving original structures, we're reconstructing buildings, and we're also constructing new facilities to support our mission. We have architectural preservation and research. This is actually the area that I came out of. This is my background, is architectural preservation and conservation. This is the group that really does that research, that watches the work, comes up with treatment plans for the buildings, but also does all the work to restore them, as well as reconstruct buildings. So they're kind of our preservation heart. They watch all of the resources out there in the historic area, especially. So this is the building trades group, and so this is the carpenters, the painters, and the masons that work on all of these buildings. And then mechanical trades. These are our electricians, our plumbers, and our mechanics that work on all the environmental control systems. Landscape, we have both colonial revival and 18th century landscapes, as well as modern landscapes that we oversee. And then hospitality maintenance. We actually have 2 National Register districts that include kind of a shopping area as well as a hotels area. So this is the group that oversees kind of those more modern facilities, modern being 1920s and 1930s. Warehouse and fleet. This is basically all of the supplies for all the different groups that are working. So we have a warehouse group and a fleet group, which oversees all of the vehicles. Health and safety, making sure that we're doing things properly, that we're following Virginia state health and OSHA regulations. And so that group kind of works to keep everything safe and everything compliant. So roughly that's the preservation and operations division. And the area that they really work in is, this is a map of kind of the core of the city of Williamsburg. And this is the area that Colonial Williamsburg, this is the core of where our operations function. It's roughly a mile long and 2 miles wide in the city core. And we have different facilities. So we have our visitor center complex. This is where visitors are first engaged. This is where they park, they get their tickets. There's an orientation film here, and then they're getting their guidance on the programming for the day and entering into the historic area. This is our academic campus. This is where our curators, our conservators, our conservation labs, our library and archives are here. A lot of my group is here too. So we have finance, we have human resources, architecture and engineering, security, all at this campus as well. And this is just outside the historic core. And then, like I said earlier, we have our hotels area, which this is a national register district. And so we have 2 hotels that sit in this area. And this is actually a National Register site. This is the Williamsburg Inn. And so this is something that we kind of look over in a different way. So we'll bring both groups, the building trades group and the modern hospitality maintenance, into play with this site. And then we have Merchant Square. This is kind of the shopping area. It actually served as a very early model for the modern day mall. So it's from the 1920s and is a National Register district. So we're very careful with the maintenance and upkeep of this area as well, even though it functions kind of as a modern day shopping area. And then we have our museums, our museum area. So we have a large decorative arts museum. I think it's about 150,000 square feet. So that's what you see here. It's actually under this building. And this is the 18th century public hospital, which is the entrance. And we've now added a new entrance onto the building. That would be on the left hand of your screen. And on the right hand, looking across the street, this is the new archaeology center that's just been opened. It opened last month. So all of our archaeological operations, collections, and conservation occur in that building now that's open to the public. So we oversee the modern mechanical as well as maintenance of these buildings as well. We also work on some buildings that don't belong to us. So William and Mary, second largest college in the United States, was here before the Capitol. So it's a 17th century site school. But this is the Wren building. So we assist them with the repair and upkeep of their historic campus as well. And then Bruton Parish Church, which is an active congregation in the historic area proper here at Colonial Williamsburg. We help them with advice on caring for their structure as well. So at the core of our mission is the historic area. So that's what's seen here in yellow. That's about a mile long and a half mile wide. It has 623 structures in it. Overall, we're overseeing about 722 structures, but this is at the core. So this is the interpretive area. This is a National Historic Landmark District with all of the buildings contributing to that. And so here you go. Here's some of the numbers. 603. We're now at 604. We have the equivalent of 44 house museums within this area. And there you kind of get an overview. That's off the top of the the Governor's Palace looking down Palace Green, and all the diverse resources there. So here you see a grouping of our original structures that survived. So these date, at the top is the St. George Tucker House. That's in its current form, that's probably it's really around 1780. Lower left is Weatherburn's Tavern, which is a 1720s building, as well as Robert Carter, the Gray House on the lower right, and that's 1727. We have our reconstructions. These are based on archaeology and architectural fragments that we have surviving from the buildings. So at the top is a building that was reconstructed around 2008 to 2010. That's the Coffee House. It is a 1750s structure. We have in the architectural collections, we probably have about 1,000 fragments from this building that survived in a house that was built on this site. A lot of archaeological evidence, as well as two other buildings on the lower part of the slide. Those buildings date to about the 1750s, but are reconstructions based on archaeological and documentary evidence. So keeping track of these buildings is actually, it's fairly complex for us. So here we see the original 1717 Everard House. And to keep track of these buildings and keep track of all the information, you see the map of the historic area here. We actually have a block and building system that we've developed. And this system never changes. These numbers never change. If a building, for some reason, were to be destroyed, that number would be basically retired. And because what we've seen is that over time, addresses have changed for our buildings, as well as the names of our buildings. So associating them with different owners. So, but the block and building numbers never change. And this has been the case since the 1920s. So you see assignment of numbers here on the map for every block. And there are hard stops to those numbers. And then also within that block, every building is given a specific number and sometimes letter designation, depending on if it's a support building for the main structure. So that's what we're doing here. And that's what all of our records and all of our work orders are based on. Here you see all the different names. So this is a big catalog of all of our structures that everybody here at the foundation can access, but all the names, the current addresses, and the block and building numbers. And then also, we actually go in and catalog the buildings themselves. This is actually something that I started doing early on in my career when I was at Kenmore, and it really helped keep track of where issues were, and also documenting work and conditions throughout the building. And you can see this with room numbers, door numbers, window numbers, and in fact, we will label everything where you start to get into trim and fireplaces, stairs, all of that, to keep track of this. Because what I found is if you start giving directional information to people, they get very confused. Not everybody knows which way is north and east. And so again, the abbreviations and documentation of that. And we have a big preventative maintenance program here as well, for 44 sites, 121 structures. We have an intranet site, which is an internal website where all staff can access this information on. And this is kind of going through. This is the Architectural Preservation and Research Department's intranet site. We can go in and look at all the building closings, which is our preventative maintenance program. You can see the schedules here. So again, all staff are aware of the schedules for the closing. We have 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year rotations for buildings, depending on their use. And then what to prepare for during a building closing, because a lot of this information we actually get from staff. And then also the scheduling process is pretty intense, and everyone is part of that. We go through for the inspections. This is our inspection list. This is actually the work list that we create that are distributed to all the different groups and the site staff as well. And then one of our programs is the paint and repair program. So we actually looked at the life expectancy of paint, which has changed over the years. So 15 years ago, 10 to 12 years of life expectancy. 6 years ago, it was 7 to 10 years of life expectancy. And today, if you're painting with a modern paint, you can expect life expectancy of 5 to 7 years before you start to see elevated levels of damage. So 603 buildings, we paint about 86 buildings a year here, which takes a lot of effort. Again, the Robert Carter House here, you get damage, pretty significant damage if you start to go over that paint life expectancy time period. So I use the Margaret Hunter's shop as an example, 5 to 7 years. And year 7, you can expect, this cost for painting, but the damage, if you go over that 7th year, is what we were really looking on. And this is how you really engage your board and your senior staff and your senior leadership in, really investing in these programs, is to look at what it costs to delay. So you can see after year 7 and year 8, you go from 9.5% of roughly your overall paint cost for repair to 13.4, and at 10 years you're at 21. So it goes up pretty quickly. Not only are you losing valuable and original material, but you're also increasing those repair costs fairly dramatically. And that really resonates, especially on the finance side of things. And we worked very closely with a lot of our partners. So we have a close relationship with Benjamin Moore right now. We do have a paint line with them. And yes, it is a modern paint. When we have so many buildings like this, we can't paint all of our buildings with accurate materials. We do that with some, but not with all. But we work very closely with their testing labs as well. And we have analytical labs here at Colonial Williamsburg where we do all of our paint analysis internally. We're obviously doing documentary research, and we're partnering with Benjamin Moore to make sure that historic information and the modern materials, and we're getting what we need to protect our buildings and interpret them accurately. We go through all of our buildings again on that rotation. Basically, it's a 7-year rotation. All of our costs, so we can estimate what it's going to cost us. And then the documentation. So this is a normal paint form for a building. As we change paint colors, we're constantly updating these, and these stay in the records of the foundation going back to the 1920s. We have our intrusion list. These go out to the foundation every week. Everybody at the foundation gets these, telling everybody what work's going on at what sites and at what times, so we can watch the visitor impact, and staff are aware of the work that's going on. Environmentally, we have a system called Metasys. This is one of the things that Work Control is looking at. And this monitors all the environmental systems at the foundation. So you see some of these charts, there's lots of alarms that go off, and then the calls go out to mechanical or to site staff to find out what's going on. And from an interpretive standpoint, obviously we have really broad range of sites and individuals. And in Williamsburg in the 18th century, roughly half of the population here was enslaved. So it's a very important story. And we engage the community actively in the interpretation. In fact, we do have advisory committees made up from the local Black community here in Williamsburg. And we've had 2 big projects that they've been heavily, that committee's been heavily involved in. On the right, you can see our archaeologists meeting with some of the members at the site of Baptist Meeting, which is one of the earliest Black congregations in America, still active. This is their late 18th, early 19th century church site. And so the congregation and descendants of the individuals that went to this church are very active in this process of investigating and now reconstructing the church so it can be interpreted here at Colonial Williamsburg. And on the left is the Bray School. This is the earliest surviving school where Black children were educated in the United States. It dates to 1759, 1760. And so this has just been restored in the last year and a half. But again, community heavily involved, descendants of the children that attended this school heavily involved. And one of my favorite things is that they would come through a lot. And in fact, we opened the building to the descendants before anyone else. And they were involved to the point where if you see on the left-hand side, all of the signatures in the inside of a wall cavity, those are the signatures of descendants of the children that actually attended this school in the 18th century. So heavy involvement there, as well as the Native American community as well. They had a presence in Williamsburg in the 18th century, and so actively involved. A lot of our interpreters are also our primary researchers. So they're researching the individuals that they're interpreting, but also the time period. And then archaeology obviously takes this into account and deals with a lot of the local tribes as we uncover artifacts and engage them actively on the interpretation, as well as how to best handle these objects and sites, and obviously interpretation. And then there's all kinds of things that we do for interpretation. Obviously, there's a lot of first-person interpretation here. We also have a lot of museum programs, active visitation. Our visitations between 500 and 600,000 a year. So there's a lot of people that visit here, but one of the big programs that we do here is field trips and teacher workshops. So we have something called Teacher Institute, where we have teachers from all 50 states. I want to say we have about 150 teachers here a year, I believe. And so we bring teachers here for an immersive 2-week experience. And those teachers get information. They get a lot of resources. Teachers have to pay for resources a lot of times. So Colonial Williamsburg is actively creating resources that we send to teachers, or that we create that they can get online. And you see some of those here. We have Patriots, I think it's called Patriots at Play, which is a computer game that students can play. But we also have a lot of videos that go online too that are created here. And then crowds. I was asked to talk about crowd control. We have a lot of different things. The streets of Colonial Williamsburg are city streets. We don't control those. We control all the land around them. So we have parades that can go through the middle of town. We have our normal programs. Fife and drum are in the middle. During the summer, there's a few thousand people that will come to each one of those programs. We have naturalization ceremonies that occur at the Capitol here. The governor will come to visit. We have Christmas markets. The Today Show was just here broadcasting from the historic area. We have concerts. And then if you see the fireworks in the top left, that's probably one of the bigger things. So we have 2 events, July 4th and what we call Grand Illumination. Each one of those draws about 35,000 people. So we worked very closely with the city and with the state. We have what's called an EOC. It's an emergency, it's the emergency basically response center for the city, which we're actively involved in for both weather situations and big events. And this 4th of July, we're expecting about 75,000 people to be here in Williamsburg. So that's really quickly some of the things that my department deals with here at Colonial Williamsburg.
Thank you so much, Matt, for that. At this point, I'd like to transition to the Q&A portion of the webinar. So Mitch, if you'd like to rejoin us. And to everyone in the audience, if you have a question you'd like to ask, please go ahead and submit that in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. There are some questions. This one, I think, Matt, is for you. Why is the governor's palace called a palace instead of a residence or home?
So it's called a palace because the governor in the colonial period was a representative of the king. And so that's formally what it was referred to in documents and by basically by the population. That's how they actually referred to it, as the governor's palace, representative of the king in colonial
Interesting.
America.
Thank you. For Mitch, with the Seward House building and collections having high integrity, can you speak about managing the setting, the site's landscape, and how you balance the needs for historic authenticity, interpretation of the family's life out of doors, and competing issues like access, parking, etc.? Any partnership opportunities here? Very different set of issues at Colonial Williamsburg, I'm sure.
Yeah, so there are four main treatments to historic preservation. There's reconstruction, restoration, rehabilitation, and preservation. Seward House focuses exclusively on preservation and rehabilitation. So if an element exists on the site, we want to preserve it. Matt did a great job discussing how maintenance is a key component of historic preservation. Preventative maintenance is how you keep things around. So if it exists, we want to preserve it, maintain it. If it's something we're looking to build on top of, the gardens are a great example. That's when we focus on rehabilitation. We are inspired by the historic core and the historically significant components of the gardens, but we also recognize that we're a 21st century museum. We need to be accessible. We'd like to have events outside. What does that mean in terms of utilities, square footage, accessibility again? So blending our needs as a 21st century organization with being inspired with what was there historically, that's rehabilitation. So we do a lot of that here at Seward House.
Thank you. For Matt, what has been your approach to accessibility at Williamsburg?
So that's, I mean, dealing with the original structures, that's always a challenge. But we have quite a few lifts in place. We have uh, basically iPads with videos of spaces that are not accessible, as well as paying attention to our pathways, our programming, making sure that everything is as accessible as it possibly can be. But we do have quite a few lifts that are incorporated in, and we work actively with the companies to develop lifts that can kind of be incorporated into the structures without both damaging them but also giving access.
Okay, I think this question is for both of you. What is one of the most unusual artifacts at your historic site?
Um, Mitch, I don't know if you have a quick answer.
We have Seward toilet paper.
What is that?
It's
Brandon?
exactly what it sounds like. It's a roll of toilet paper with Seward's name on it. So if any of you are keeping track as to how successful you are in your careers, you haven't made it unless you have toilet paper named after you.
That's
Wow.
amazing.
We don't have personalized toilet paper, so it's like, so you went I don't know, um we have some I mean, we have some great artifacts. We have George Washington's personal fob, the wax seal. So we have the actually fob, the thing that makes the seal. So we have that. That's pretty neat. But yeah, I mean, we have some great collections here. So
I think there was a question related to that about the collection storage. Do you have a large storage facility at both of your historic sites? And are there a lot of places that are not accessible to visitors where you're storing artifacts?
Well, we're a historic house museum. We utilize old servants' quarters, bathrooms, closets. The main building is 13,000 square feet, and we're using every single square foot of that for exhibition and storage. So we don't have enough room for our collection, if I'm being honest. We're just overflowing with items. And because we don't have internal environmental controls, a lot of the more sensitive objects are in cabinets.
yeah, we have large facilities here. So I mean, obviously we have objects that, decorative arts objects that are in the museum proper. But then we also have the 44 sites where there are original objects displayed inside buildings. But then also we have our collections and conservation building. That's primarily the decorative arts are stored there, or fragile. We also have architectural storage. So we have a huge architectural collection here. So we're not just Williamsburg, we're kind of colonial America contact, real, actually not even colonial America, we're contact through 1830 is our primary collecting time period. So we have architectural storage, which is about, I'd say for now, about 25,000 objects in there. And then archaeology has its own building, which I think that they're up to like 1.5 million artifacts so far. So that's all stored. They have a deep storage facility and then their new building where they have a lot of storage as well.
Okay, thank you. This question is for Mitch. Have you noticed any additional wear and tear to flooring materials such as carpets since allowing people to enter the parlor in Seward House?
Yes, absolutely. The carpets were installed 50 years ago and they look like it. Um, so the main carpets in the main halls definitely have exhibited wear and tear. There's two rooms that we have more modern carpets that are made to look like historic carpets we would have had, and those get bunched up sometimes. They need to be cleaned. Again, it comes down to preventative maintenance. If we stay on top of our cleaning, they wear a little bit less frequently, but the answer is yes.
I think I will just try to grab one more question here before we end. Um, this could go for both of you. Are there ever any conflicts when working with multiple community organizations?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Um,
go ahead, Matt.
I mean, I think that, I think that any individual has their idea of how something should be done or something should be interpreted. And, that's part of, I think that's part of what we all do as professionals. And you have to walk that very fine. I assume the question is really, how do you deal with that? And I think that there's a very fine line. Our job is to present the facts, not to tell people how they should feel about them. And so we do our best job to do that. And that's a very fine line to walk, and it's a difficult line to walk, especially when it comes to um, history, because there's a lot of feelings there. So we work very hard to try to present facts and not give our opinions on what those facts mean. So.
Thank you both so much. I see one last question, which I think will be a very quick one. Do either of your sites offer a field school for preservationists?
We have lots of opportunities. So I mean, this goes back to also the collections. So our collection storage is not on the main tour, but if you were to contact us as a professional doing research or trying to understand how these places function, we will take you to those areas. But as far as field schools, there's archaeological field schools. Hopefully, there'll be some preservation field schools in the future, but there's a tremendous number of internship and fellowship opportunities here. So that's always, and those are up on our website for employment.
Similar situation at Seward House. We have a very robust internship program here. So well, we don't have actual field schools. We have a lot of opportunities for people to come in and gain good experience in the field, the museum field, that is.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today and for this very engaging question and answer session. We are especially grateful to you, Matt and Mitch, for so generously sharing your time and expertise with us. The speakers have shared some of their top recommended resources, and we will be posting these recommendations on our website later this week for anyone who is looking for further information on these topics. Thank you again, and we hope you all have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks.